Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. FlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. FlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/FlexTrack to claim your free month. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is flat networks inside the cloud and data center that allow threats to move laterally and compromise vulnerable targets. But microsegmentation using traditional firewalls is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation. Using the identity of machines and software that are communicating, Edgewise offers the strongest protection that adapts automatically to changes. Protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Would you like to have all of your favorite Security Weekly content at your fingertips, learn about upcoming webcasts and technical trainings, or just wish you could hang out with the Security Weekly crew and community? You can do all that by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe, where you can sign up for our mailing list, join our community Discord server, and subscribe to all of the shows on the Security Weekly network at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Ed Skoudis is here with us because it's holiday time, and Ed Skoudis, of course, is running the Holiday Hack Challenge. Ed is, of course, no stranger to the show and serves a very special place in Security Weekly history, especially as we move to celebrate our 15-year anniversary. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, and congratulations on 15 years. Wow. What a ride it's been, huh? 15 more coming, right?
I go back to that conversation, that famous conversation we had where you're like, hey, Paul, you should give back to the community because that's how you're going to do good things and be well in this great community. And here we are 15 years later. And you've built something amazing. I mean, the whole crew there is just awesome. Such great friends. We've had such good times together. And I can't wait until we do that again. Right? I know. It's like someday, like 2022, I think, we'll be all like not wanting to stay home anymore and all, hopefully going out. And of course, the Holiday Hack Challenge is become its own thing every year. It's great, something we get to look forward to, right? I mean, we always look forward to the holidays, but now I really do associate the holidays with, we get a new Holiday Hack Challenge. Yay. Along with like presents and all kinds of festivities, largely happening virtually now, but still, the Holiday Hack Challenge is completely virtual.
It was always virtual.
It's always virtual, so that's
we did virtual before virtual was cool.
That's right.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's so much cool now.
We're launching next week.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
It's coming.
So Ed, I want to hear stories about, no, obviously not giving away any spoilers. Just throwing it out there. We don't give away spoilers because, I mean, it really would spoil the fun for folks, right? But you always have great stories to kind of share about, you started planning this last year in 2019 at some point and have continued planning this new one for this year in 2020.
15 months. This one's 15 months in the making.
15 months. Yeah, so
I was going to say, he was telling us about this edition last year's episode.
I've already started working on next year's story. I mean, we have to. It's just these things take so long to bake. So Santa told me what's happening that you'll hear about next year. But for this year's one, I'm happy to tell you a little bit about the story. So last year, we ended on a cliffhanger. You found out that the Tooth Fairy was trying to destroy the holiday season because she was jealous of Santa Claus, right? And because he gets all the attention and such, and she has to get the disembodied teeth of children. And that's kind of a rough job, let's just say. So that's what you found out at the end of last year, right?
It's like the end of the Marvel movie. There's this like cliffhanger, like after the credits, there's like the cliffhanger kind of cutscene, right?
That's what we did. At the very last scene, there was a scrap of paper left on the ground. And if you click on that scrap of paper, you'll see that written in the Tooth Fairy's handwriting, which looks remarkably like my own, but written in the Tooth Fairy's handwriting, she says, "I didn't do this myself. I had Jack Frost helping me." So we kind of told you who the bad guy's going to be in 2020. It is Jack Frost. but you have to figure out what he's done and how he's done it, and then thwart his plan for attacking the holiday season. So that's the starting point, and that's where we kind of left you at the end of last year. So this year we got some really cool news. If you look at holiday, I'm calling it the HHCU, right? The Holiday Hack Challenge universe now, because we've got these stories that are building. Mm-hmm. So it's not MCU, it's HHCU, right? So in 2018, Santa Claus hosted KringleCon inside his castle at the North Pole, but the castle got super crowded. So in 2019, we moved it to the largest venue at the time at the North Pole, which everybody knows is Elf University, right? Elf U for short. So that's where we were last year. But Elf U got pretty packed. So Santa has spent the last year doing major upgrades, a huge construction project to his castle. He's added all kinds of new stuff. We've got a new courtyard out back. There's a new Net Wars room on the roof. There's a magical elevator. It's really cool. Now, it's still a little bit under construction. You'll see some elves wearing hard hats and, some nails and ladders and wallpaper and stuff. Are
there like elf binaries in there somewhere? Is that...
No, you bet there definitely are.
There has to be.
There definitely are. Yep. So, so you're going to enter this thing that's still a little bit under construction. And you'll get to solve all kinds of great challenges. You get to interact with the elves. There's lots of hints. We try to make it as fun as we can, but a really compelling storyline with a lot of little twists and turns in it. The other thing that we're saying is, we're hearing from the elves that Santa is behaving kind of strangely this year. We're not exactly sure what's going on. It's probably just stress. I mean, look, it's been a rough year for all of us, but Santa is saying some things that are kind of unusual. So we just kind of are warning people, when you get there, you might see Santa kind of say or do some strange things. Just keep an eye on that. I'm sure everything will turn out just fine.
Is Rudy Giuliani representing Santa?
Oh, boy. Rudy Giuliani is not featured in this year's Holiday Hack Challenge.
I thought maybe representing Santa.
Does Santa have a cough and a fever by chance?
He may. Yes.
Did you build in stuff around the pandemic, or is this a world where we can escape from?
It's a world where you can escape. We did a Holiday Hack Challenge, a little one, as we called it Mini Net Wars Mission 3. We did that in May, and that was Santa Claus building video games to deal with the pandemic. But for this story, we want to take people out of that, and we don't even mention it. We don't even talk about it.
Yep.
You're gathering together with a bunch of friends in this virtual world and just having some fun and hacking stuff.
Right. So we can literally get together and hack stuff with our friends and not have to worry about wearing masks and using hand sanitizer. I think that's a great call.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that feels awful normal. I mean, are we going to get away with a normal type event this holiday season?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be normal for Holiday Hack Challenge. I mean, that's how we run this thing.
I love it.
But
I love something normal. We need more normal.
We need a little Christmas right now. But there'll be no elves in masks and no comments on COVID or anything like that. And we are doing a bunch of stuff to try to make it more interactive this year. We're taking a leaf out of your book. We're creating a Discord channel. Actually a whole series of channels so that you can go in and chat with people, play on teams, talk about specific challenges. We'll have different channels devoted to each challenge. There's going to be voice channels. There's going to be text chat channels. So we're launching Discord. So that's one big thing.
Will there be like hints? And I know like hints are, I'd actually like to talk about how you do hints, Ed, because hints are very much a part of, or maybe not, certain types of challenges, and appropriate and not appropriate, I think, in all of the challenges that we build. So will there be hints in the Discord, and how do you handle hints inside of these challenges?
So we are not putting hints in Discord ourselves. The hints from us come via the elves. The idea is you click on an elf, and the elf will start giving you hints. Now, you might have to help the elf solve a problem in a terminal, but once you help the elf solve a problem, they'll start giving you a whole bunch of hints. So we provide all those hints. That said, players might give hints to other players inside of Discord, and we're fine with that. Our big focus is on building skills and having fun. Yes, there's a competition. You write up an essay of your results, and we judge those essays, and the first place prize for the best set of answers is a free Sans class. We also have Net Wars Continuous, couple subscriptions for that. RSA Conference is donating a few attendance subscriptions for virtual RSA coming in May.
Nice.
So there are prizes, but we're really emphasizing the educational aspect of this and just the plain fun and community aspect of it. So we got Discord. The other thing that we did this year, for the last 5 years, we have released our albums of music for free because we had all this custom music made and, for Holiday Hack Challenge. And we've released them via MP3s, but who listens to those anymore? So I just announced last night that we have Holiday Hack Challenge 2016 music, 2018 and 2019 available on all the major streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, etc. 2017 is being pushed right now, and I hear that it's on everything except Spotify. It's almost there on Spotify. And we're going to release the 2020 music when 2020 goes live so that you can listen to it on a stream if you'd like. And the music this year, I take a special interest in the music. It is integral to the storyline, number one. And number two, it's all these different varieties of music. We have some jazz, we have rockabilly, we have techno, we've got blues. It's just really, really cool this year. Oh, we've got rap. Dual Core made another rap song for us, and I think it's the best dual core song we've ever had in Holiday Hack.
Please tell me you have elevator music in the elevator.
Dude, you better believe it. It's the best elevator music ever. It is. Awesome. It's so good. I'm really happy about it.
Zamfir, master of the pan flute.
That's right. No pan flute this year. That's next year.
Oh, okay.
We have a bunch of mini
first.
games. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you heard it here first. Pan flute next year.
There you go. We could probably do that.
Pan's the man.
Ninjala is very versatile. Count Ninjala, I think he made 5 or 6 songs for us this year. We've got a couple of surprise musicians that are going to make appearances in it. And there's this beautiful, luscious ballad that we had created this year that, again, helps to tell the story. So we got the music now via streaming services. In the past, we've had 1 or 2 mini games. This is like a little video game inside the world that you can play or you can hack it. This year, we have, depending on how you count, 4 or 5 mini games, which are kind of cool. And when you hack them, you're doing sort of web application manipulation or packet manipulation or something like that. So more mini games than ever. I really do think, knock on wood, this is our best Holiday Hack Challenge ever. The team has really been working all year on it. We started brainstorming on the storyline, 15 months ago. And then we started building challenges January of this year. We had an all-hands meeting for a couple of days in March. It was, well, I guess, it wasn't all hands. It was all faces because we did it virtual because of COVID. Then we had another meeting again in July, another meeting in October. And we are in our final stages of testing now. In fact, we had beta testers come in on, I think it was Monday night. And I was sitting there in the world and I watched all the beta testers start to run by me. It was so exciting.
And how much of the experience, especially this year, is interactive in the game and I have to solve a challenge, or are there also artifacts that I take out of the game and go work on to kind of solve a puzzle and then go back in the game and apply that? Or is it all in the game?
It's both, but the vast majority of it is all in the game. Mm-hmm. We try to make as much of it in the game so it feels like you're in this world as possible. That said, certain kinds of analysis lend themselves to downloading a file and starting to look through it.
But do I get like a terminal inside the game and I have to type and do stuff, right?
Yep, there's terminals all over inside the game. There's web-based interfaces to a lot of the tools that require web-based interfaces. But, for example, you mentioned, analysis of a binary, an ELF binary, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And, we let you download that, or an executable, we let you download that because you're going to want to. You're going to want to take a look at it and peel it apart with your own tools. But also we provide terminals so you can look at it with the tools we think you're going to need for it.
It's amazing how you've combined this hacking challenge with an interactive video game, which also a lot of the interactive games today carry with it a storyline and a plot and music very similar to a movie. I think it's just amazing how you put all these pieces together to create, because you didn't create a movie, you didn't create a video game, you didn't create a challenge. It was some conglomeration of all three of those together.
I got to tell you, it was originally Josh Wright's idea. Back in 2015, we talked about how could we take the storytelling that we're trying to do via our challenges to the next level. And Josh came up with the idea of doing it in a video game using Browser Quest. And we did that in 2015 and 2016, and we kind of pushed Browser Quest to its edge of capabilities and stability, I might add. So we started rolling our own engine since then, and the engine's come together very nicely, and it's got some capabilities this year. It's really kind of cool because we'll come up with a story that we want to tell, and then the technology challenges kind of fit into that story. But then we'll also have to do some video game development because we need new things in the video game to be able to tell the story. So the whole thing kind of fits together. And then with the music, you know, it's a soundtrack, and we're so used to when we're hearing these stories told on screens having soundtracks to them. So anyway, I love doing it. It is a lot of work. In fact, I'm looking at my eyes on this screen right now. Do I look tired?
Yeah, a little, not bad.
Were they supposed to match your hat?
Yeah.
What's that?
The eyes match the red in your hat.
I think so. Yeah, really. But it's been great. I mean, we're right on schedule. We're going to launch, like I said, next week, but we don't publish a launch date. We do a soft launch because if we did a launch date, you know, it'd be like everybody hitting refresh at the same time to get into ShmooCon or tickets, you know. So we will launch sometime next week. We do a soft launch where we just turn it on. And when we just turn it on, we usually see 1,000 or 2,000 people just kind of file in. And we talk to them. They start tweeting about it, but we usually wait. We watch for a day or two to make sure things are going smoothly. We tweak things this way or that way, depending on how we see players doing. And then we do the big announcement, usually a day or two after soft launch. Last year, we had 17,000 people participate. This year, you know, based on what we're seeing and hearing, we're expecting 30,000, maybe up to 50,000, because, you know, lockdowns are increasing and things like that. So people are looking for something to do. And, you know, the social and networking aspect of this, I think, is one of its best aspects.
Ed, with that number of people, what are some of the ways you were able to scale it with technology? I mean, I think in years past, you've talked about using Node.js, you've talked about using containers. And obviously, this is not hosted on a server in your basement somewhere. It's hosted in the cloud. Are there multiple cloud? Like, how are you scaling that?
Oh, it's really cool. We've done a lot of innovative things. We started doing with the Holiday Hack Challenge back in May, where we introduced multiple worlds. Because that one, we had 5,000 simultaneous players. So how do you do that? We have multiple different worlds. And it's all hosted in Google cloud environment, so Google Compute. And it's a bunch of Docker containers running on top of that. It's an Ubuntu-based distribution with a whole bunch of Docker containers that are spun up dynamically. The game architecture itself, on the client side, it's on React, managing the state via Redux, and there's microservices that are handling all kinds of messaging being passed via RabbitMQ. I mean, it's a really cool technology.
I mean, it's like what you just described. It is an enterprise level application that
it's amazing. I'm amazed that the team. I'm proud of my team. Please understand, but they architected this thing, and I'm just amazed at what they've created. But this multi-world thing is automatic. So I mean, we've built it out so that if it starts sensing that its worlds are filling up, it instantiates another world and starts sticking people there. Now, there are trade-offs with that, so that, you know, Paul and Larry might be both playing, but you'll be in different worlds, so you won't see each other. Right now, we said, I think the default size is 200 players per world. So if we have, you know, say 1,000 people playing at the same time, there's probably going to be 5 worlds. There might be 10 worlds. There might be 20 or 30 worlds at the same time. So anyway, this multi-world thing, dynamically spawning new worlds, is pretty cool. And then freeing them up so that our Google Compute bill doesn't get too high when they're not needed anymore.
Right.
Yep.
And then also, I mean, preventing folks from hacking the actual architecture that's running the game. I mean, you want people to hack within the game, but you want people to hack outside the game. Yeah. Also, is another level of architecture. You have, well, I mean, it is speaking to the architecture, but you have to threat model that as well. It's
true. And, you know, look, they have found vulnerabilities in our stuff, unintentional ones, right? Obviously, we have a lot of intentional ones for the challenges, but they found unintentional stuff. You know, we thank them. We ask them to be kind to us and, you know, report this stuff to us. We offer it up for free, so we don't really have a bug bounty. That said, you know, you might get a Kringle coin, you know, if you find something and are nice to us about it. Kringle coins, by the way, are these coins that we had made up last year. I used to have one on my desk, but I think we sent it out in the mail to a little kid that really wanted one.
But I mean, you're not necessarily encouraging people to find those vulnerabilities, but be responsible. Like, what's your I mean, just because our audience is listening,
sure,
we receive reports on that all the time as well.
Yep.
And I think pretty much 100% of the time, people are, like you said, really nice about it. But I mean, rules of engagement, right? For everyone.
Don't hack our stuff.
Yep.
Oh, but if you somehow accidentally so you can hack the stuff that we include in the scope. I mean, it's like a pen test.
Right.
You're allowed to hack this. You're not allowed to hack that. That said, sometimes you find some issues in the stuff that you're not allowed to hack. Tell us about them. Be nice to us about it. We'll be very thankful. And, we might send you a nice little gift for your kindness.
Right. Awesome. That's a great policy.
You should do a release of all the music on 78 RPM for Victrola.
It's actually interesting. I happen to have, it's right here.
Imagine that.
This here is a 78 RPM that my team had made up of Holiday Hack Challenge 2016 music for
All
me.
Right.
It is so cool. Do you want to hear it?
Should be playing in the background.
Definitely play it.
All right. So
I mean, if you ever wondered, like, how would I get my own custom record printed up? Oh, the internet.
Okay,
right? Like, click your heels three times.
That is absolutely fabulous. And the fact that Ed is actually winding up the gramophone, it's fantastic. That is absolutely
the look on Tyler's face is just like, what?
Right, and not just pressed any record, pressed a 78, which is
pressed 78. Wow. That's fantastic. It really.
I didn't even know they still press 78s.
Right,
it's like
much less.
Dr. Fives coming on here.
All right, we got to be quiet for a minute so we can hear it.
It's playing.
You can probably get an 8-inch floppy too, Tyler.
I hear it. I can
so
hear
it's
it.
We can hear it. We can hear it.
The Sugar Plum Fairies, done by Count Ninjula, playing through a 1904 phonograph player. It's a Victor phonograph player, and so every year my team gets me a really wonderful little Christmas gift, and that's what they got me a couple years ago.
That's awesome.
So I have to say, it was kind of funny that Ed mentioned about the kind of tangential vulnerabilities that might be found. I was playing a couple of years ago, and I actually found one of those, and I didn't realize it. I thought it was part of the game. And so I just kept on trucking forward. But the problem was one of the side effects of finding an actual vulnerability, in this case, I think it was a web app command injection vulnerability, was that I actually sort of stepped forward about 3 steps in the game, and I missed like about 3 or 4 of the hints. And then I remember talking to Jeff McJunkin or chatting to him over Twitter or something, and Jeff's like, "Oh, dude, that's a real vulnerability."
Yeah, it happens. I mean, look, we work really hard to try to make this stuff secure, but I mean, we all know this. This is our industry. Stuff happens. You miss things. No matter how hard you try, you want to have good belt and suspenders. Oh, another new thing we're launching this year is we have a status page. So you can look at the health of our various services to make sure, if you're trying to solve this challenge and it's not really working, is it because the given service that challenge relies on is down? So that way we're kind of constantly checking every few minutes, and you can look at our status screen to see how that's going. We have a Git repository where people can report issues to us, which is good. We've had that for a couple of years now. So, I mean, there's this whole vast infrastructure of stuff. Also, the people that we have, we've got, a character artist. People ask me all the time, where do you get these great characters? It's a lady named Annie Royal, and she's from the UK. She does great character work. We've got great artists that do layout stuff. And, Evan Booth on the team, he's the primary developer of the video game piece. And he's a great artist outright. I mean, the guy makes just incredibly beautiful things.
I got a question about the technology. So you featured the Cranberry Pi terminals for many years, giving you the terminal access to do stuff. Has Santa upgraded from the Cranberry Pi 3 to the Cranberry Pi 4 this year?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Awesome.
I upgraded my own Raspberry Pis in the office over the summer to Raspberry Pi 4, so that now I tweeted about this. In fact, it was, I think, my most retweeted tweet ever. But on my 1951 porthole TV, I have it driven now by a Raspberry Pi 4. And the cool thing about driving that from a Pi 4 is I now have enough performance so that I can run the browser-based interface of Zoom or of Netflix. Because Zoom and Netflix really like to have an x86 or x64 infrastructure, and the Pi, of course, is ARM based. But that said, with their browser interface, you can still run those things as long as you got enough horsepower on an ARM based infrastructure, and it works just great. So, yeah, if you ever want to see a Zoom meeting or a Netflix show on a TV from 1951, it's we've got it.
Awesome.
That is so Ed Skoudis, right?
That's a whole that's like a whole different kind of retro Pi.
Yeah.
Which is different from the retro Pi video game, of course.
But we do have there are Cranberry Pis throughout the game, and they are Cran Pi 4s, of course. And that the idea is we have these things called objectives, and the objectives are the things you've got to conquer to win this thing. In addition to the objectives, we have these little terminal challenges. They're on the Cranberry Pis, and they're designed to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's what they're designed to. Sometimes they take longer because they're harder than we think they are. Last year we had one. It was a PowerShell thing that controlled a Christmas cheer laser, and that was a lot harder than we thought it would be. But usually these terminal challenges are designed to be solved in 15 minutes or less. And then once you solve them, we give you hints for the big objectives. Yeah,
I hear this a new piece of hardware too. I'm not going to say what it is, and I don't expect you to, but I hear there's some really new, cool hardware that you can interact with in the game.
It is so freaking awesome. That's my favorite part of the whole game. So yeah,
I talked with the guy that worked on it. And I won't give up any names because it might give some of the stuff away, but like I'm super excited to see it and see it in action. And I think that could be really awesome for other CTFs now that we're doing a lot of this stuff virtually.
Well, hold on. This is virtual hardware that you're interacting with in the game, or does the game allow you to interact with actual hardware?
It is a simulation of hardware that is running pretty much the same software. So you might as well be sitting in front of the real deal. So you'll see.
Yep.
Ed, anything else you want to announce about this year's Holiday Hack Challenge? And I just have like one or two questions about what the future may be.
Sure. Well, I wanted to talk about the technologies that you'll be able to interact with. I'm not going to say just hack, because there's offense, there's defense, there's defer, there's everything in this thing. But there's some cloud-based stuff. There's some really nifty stuff associated with analytics of data sets like logs. There's some really cool wireless stuff in it this year. There's some great crypto challenges this year with lots of hints. So if you're not big on crypto right now, just wait. You're going to pick up some good skills there. So all kinds of cool stuff. It's just a great mix of challenges.
So for the future, Oculus has really taken off in the virtual reality sense. Have you thought about integrating some type of virtual reality, based on some of these different hardware platforms?
We've talked about it. The issue is, can we do that at a reasonable cost to us? Because I mean, the team spends thousands of hours on this every year. It's the joke that we have every year. It's really not a joke, but the idea that counterhack exists, and we do all the work that we do on Net Wars. We do all the work that we do in pen testing and security consulting, all that. We do all of that just so we can feed ourselves while working on Holiday Hack Challenge, because Holiday Hack Challenge is really the purpose of the whole company, right? So, so that would be cool. It's just a question of development costs. I could see us doing some sort of virtual reality or augmented reality in a small sense. The other issue is we want this to be approachable worldwide. For people who might be very poor. We try to make sure this stuff runs at 60 frames per second in a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old computer. We don't want somebody to have to buy cloud time to do this. Because I mean, really, people play from all over. We've got a lot of people play from the US and Europe, of course, but there's people that join our game from Japan. Saudi Arabia has a bunch of avid players on this. South Africa. I mean, it's incredible, all the different countries that are represented. And sometimes it's poor kids. And we want them to have a chance to learn and develop their skills. So, if there is some sort of virtual or augmented reality, we'd want to present it to somebody who couldn't afford the hardware. So that's the tough thing.
So that said, Ed, I think one of the things that is awesome about the Holiday Hack Challenge is it's coincidence in timing to KringleCon 3.
Yes, KringleCon 3, French hens.
What, 3 French hens?
3 French hens. Yeah, last year was 2 turtle doves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now all of the talks that you'll be having at 3 French hens are on YouTube, correct?
They are. Yep. Now you can watch them in game. We have different, there's this whole hallway of doors where you can go into each one and see a series of talks, or you can just click in your badge and watch the talks on YouTube. Most people, I think, watch them on YouTube. The coolest thing, Larry, and I suspect you have a hunch about this. The coolest thing, though, is when you watch these talks, some of them will give you ideas for how you have to solve the challenges. So it's really totally integrated. You've got this conference with talks that will teach you about techniques that you then apply in the hacking challenge, the CTF itself, and it just kind of all dovetails together.
Yep. See, I was going to say you could go watch those talks on your Oculus from YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep, you can do that. Yep.
There you go.
So
you know what?
You've already done what Paul asked.
I don't think that Ed has said it enough, and I want to say this. Even for experienced pen testers, just toying around with the Holiday Hack Challenge is going to teach you something.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I love about what you're doing, Ed. Every year that you do this, and I only spend probably a small amount of time with it because, time is one of those expensive things. But it's the fact that you teach all of us something through this effort, no matter what your experience level is, I think is the greatest thing about what you're doing.
Thank you. It's the whole team. The team works super hard on these challenges, really putting in a lot of time year round. And, some people say, well, I don't have enough time to play the whole thing. Well, don't. Play some of it, though. If you've got 3 hours, give us 3 hours. You'll have some fun, and you might learn something. If you've got 10, hey, that's great. If you've got 20 or 40, we could probably keep you busy, right? So there's a lot of stuff here, and it's fun. The other thing that comes up a lot is the storytelling aspect of it. Because, gamification, one of the tenets of gamification is you let people work on what they want to work on, right? I mean, so you prefer this technology, you want to do this kind of challenge, you want to do hard stuff, you want to do easy stuff. Let you work on what you want to work on. But then when it comes to storytelling, I mean, the story has to unfold, according to some sort of logical progression. So how do you reconcile those? And we spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. So when you get into the challenge this year, boom, you get half of all of the objectives immediately, and you start working on them. But then we've got a certain point at which you have to show that you're ready for the remaining other half of all of the challenges. And once you pop through that, then you've got all of them and can work on anything you want. So we kind of bifurcated it. And I think that's a good thing, because, I mean, who wants to do something where you have to solve every little piece before you see the next piece? So we give you a big chunk, you can work on whatever you want. But then once you get through this threshold, then we give you the rest of it. So it's in 2 parts, and that helps us tell the story.
And these are pretty diverse, just to speak to folks that are like, oh, maybe I don't have the time. But you still want to learn stuff as security. Most of us want to learn new things all the time as hackers. But there's a lot of different technologies. You already mentioned there's PowerShell, there's ELF binaries, there's executables, there's forensics, right? Logs. There's lots of different types of things that would kind of cross multiple different skill sets within security and technology.
That's right. Yeah. And we really do try to have that diversity of things to keep people interested. It also keeps us interested, we'll get these crazy ideas. There's going to be some protocols that you might not have worked with before that are going to be built into this challenge. And they're very important protocols, very widely deployed. So you'll learn that. We really do try to signal to the player which ones are the easy ones and which ones are the hard ones. Every challenge has 5 little Christmas trees with it. And if one of the Christmas trees is shaded in, that means it's easy. If all 5 are shaded in, that means it's really hard.
Gotcha.
So, and we try to have a diversity of those things too. The other thing that we look at is when players play, we plot, how many people finish the first challenge? How many people finish the second challenge? How many people finish the third challenge? And obviously fewer people are going to finish the last challenge than finish the first one, because it gets harder and harder and harder. But you want it to be somewhat smooth in the way that it goes down. You don't want to have fairly easy and then boom, it got really hard here. You want some sort of gradual denouement in how many people get it. My team starts freaking out. It happens every year. they'll see, oh my gosh, this player just finished the entire thing. Yep, that's good. Oh, another one did. Oh, it's terrible. Oh my. And then we'll look at it, and 3% of people finished. And my team will freak out because if you have 17,000 players, which we had last year, 3% seems like an enormous number of people. Mm-hmm. But it's still 3%.
3%. Yeah, your curve is still even and gradual, right?
Yeah. You gotta put it in perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
He's got a question stuff in there. He keeps trying to chime in.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, how about a future enhancement where you dial up or down the difficulty?
Well, we let you do that kind of. So we do that in a couple different ways. One is you can work on the harder stuff first if you want. Right. You can bypass the easier stuff. The other thing is many of our mini games have multiple levels of difficulty, and you can choose to solve it or hack it on the easy mode or the medium mode or the hard mode. We did this with Holiday Hack Trail. I think it was last year. If you played, yeah.
Yes, and that was a fantastic one because it speaks to some of the length of some of the stuff. My eldest daughter and I played that one when the game came out last Christmas, and she thought it was fascinating. Yeah. But then we also used that as a training exercise to help sort of imbue hacker mentality to some of our non-technical staff at our all hands meeting this past year.
That's so cool.
We played it many months afterwards. Yeah,
and we do keep these things up year round. Really, I out of my own pocket, I pay many thousands of dollars to keep these up year round. So please use them. That's why we keep them up, so that you can practice anytime you want. Or if you found a challenge particularly fun or cool, while you worked on it in December, you can tell your friends about it in March or June, and you don't have to worry about them beating you on it because it's only competitive from second week of December up to January 4th. And we do ask people, don't publish your answers before January 4th. Mm. After January 4th, anything goes. You can publish your answers. We publish answers after that so that we can show people and you can learn. So if you look and want to play Holiday Hack Challenge 2019, you could start tonight and you can see the answers. They're there for you. Also I should point out, you can register right now at holidayhackchallenge.com. And if you go there, you'll see some interesting little graphics that kind of hint a little bit about what this year is going to be about, just a little bit. But you can register now, and that registration will carry into the 2020 game when we launch next week. So that's kind of a cool thing. We've never done that before. In the past, we just launched, and you had to register at that time. Now we've had registration open on this thing for a few weeks now, so you can register now, and then when we go live next week, you'll be ready to just jump right in.
holidayhackchallenge.com.
That's right.
Outstanding. Yay. Ed, you're going to stick around while we discuss news right now, unless there's any final things you want to mention about the Holiday Hack Challenge.
No, I really appreciate what you guys do. It's such a service to the community, and I'm so thankful for the show and for all that you guys do and how you bring up new, and inspiring minds and speakers and ideas just constantly. It's incredible what Security Weekly, the whole universe of Security Weekly, the SWU, right, means to the industry. So thank you for all what you guys do.
Well, thank you, Ed.
Oh, and can I say one thing?
Yeah, please do.
Ed, I was going to tell you, a lot of my students asked me to tell you thanks for the Holiday Hack Challenge. They said that was really rewarding, and they enjoyed playing it. We send students over there all the time who are trying to get into this, and when parents call me and say, how do I get my kid involved, I've been sending them there for years. So I'll thank you as well, and it's a great product.
I appreciate that. I'll pass that on to the team. We should say, I guess it's been implicit, but we should say, it's free. Right? So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's what, I always tell people, I'm like, here, people say, how do I get involved in this? How can I get in the community? I'm like, here's a thing you can do that's free, that has clues, that has training associated with it. You could actually go listen to a speaker talk about this particular hack that is being done at a professional level. And, and people always, I don't know anything about it. I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to know anything. Just go and give it a try, break things, learn things, and it will be rewarding, because that's the secret to cybersecurity, is breaking things and learning things.
That's true. And we hope that the storyline will make you laugh a little bit here and there.
Well, that too.
I love that you're encouraging people to get in the field. I'm not a huge fan of gamification when it comes to like security awareness training and things like that. Like, I get it, but I'm like, it's a business environment. I don't know. There's different you're securing an environment when it comes to getting people excited about software development, information security. Gamification, I think, is huge for engaging. There's actually studies that prove that in certain populations, especially women, especially in certain studies, just really latch on to taking on these tasks and challenges and learning new things when it's gamified. And I think that's really super important.
That's really cool. And, when we build these things, we really do try to create, an immersive environment, but also an encouraging environment for all people, independent of culture or, religion or independent of gender or anything like that. It's
because sometimes we get that really U.S.-centric view of the world too, and it's encouraging to hear that in the game it's for everyone. Right? Yeah.
We really do push on that. We had an issue this year. You have to do some. I don't want to get into details, but certain things. If you do time zones, what time zone do you choose? So we did North Pole Standard Time, which doesn't exist. The North Pole is in every time zone, right? It's a pole where they all meet. So anyway, I created NPST this year just because we needed to refer to certain times, and we wanted to be independent of any time frame on Earth. So there is stuff like that we think about. Just to keep it open and inclusive.
Is there a NPST server called Tick or Talk?
Yes, that would be maybe next year.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
And do they observe daylight savings time?
I don't know. We've only done this in December, so it's standard time. I guess we did that one in May, but there was no time.
They don't have daylight at all.
Yeah, really. How about that?
So we're transitioned into the stories right now. We wanted to have this discussion with Ed because it's tradition and it's a huge contribution to the community. Yes. Very thankful for that.
Thank you. I think I'm going to drop because I got to get back to some beta testing, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Ed, thank you so much for coming on the show this evening.
Great to see you, Ed.
Good speaking with you. Good seeing you, Ed.
Remember, we're launching next week. I hope to see you all there. Okay?
Next week, holidayhackchallenge.com. Right. Thanks, Ed.
Hey, thank you,
guys.
Bye,
Ed.
I wanted to start. I watched the 60-minute interview with Christopher Krebs. And I thought it was really fascinating, and I really did. I listened to and watched the entire thing, and I thought it was really awesome. I really relate to Chris very much so, largely because I learned in the interview he's the same age as I am, and you look into his background, like he's essentially one of us. And we've all kind of heard all really good things about him, and certainly his intentions from everything I've seen and heard have been good. Well, really caught me about the 60-minute interview is that 60 Minutes is a widely popular, everyone in America can watch. When you watch that as a security professional, there's a point in the interview where Chris says, look, during the election, or a couple of days, I think he said, leading up to the election, there was a war room. And many of us in information security have been in those war rooms, whether it's part of incident response and we had to create a war room in an emergency basis, or we knew we were launching a big project or implementing something new and we're creating a war room, whether in security or for just a release of a product, right? So war room is a very real thing that many of us have been a part of in many different capacities. Christopher said, look, we created a war room leading up to the election, and in that war room, there was the FBI, there was NSA, there was the CISA, or part of Homeland Security, obviously, which was actually created by Trump, from what I've been reading recently. I believe CISA was created by President Trump.
Yeah, it was.
And he appointed Christopher Krebs. And he said there was the U.S. Election Committee had a representation to monitor the integrity of the election. Now, most Americans heard that and be like, nah, that's cool. Like, that's great. And then, Christopher goes on to say, look, this was the most secure election. And some may question, like, well, how can he say that? I'm like, go back to the war room. When Christopher says that NSA, and very much part of Cyber Command, which is inside of it, run out of NSA, was in the room, right? And when you said that you've, really strongly believe with evidence that there was no tampering with the election, especially from foreign nation states, I'm like, as security professionals, we're like, oh yeah, because we're hacking into the other bad people, nation states that would hack into our election. So if they did start initiating attacks against the election, we're already on their systems to see that traffic happen. Right now, I have no definitive proof that this happened, other than there's an article that I mentioned, my story number 9, where in the article is Cyber Command deployed personnel to Estonia to protect elections against the Russian threat. Kind of interesting. Why we would go from the U.S. to Estonia to preserve Russia, whatever, we can speculate on that. But, they said that personnel from U.S. Department of Defense Cyber Command, which is run out of the NSA, which was in the war room, by the way, and Christopher said NSA was in the war room. I'm assuming that meant Cyber Command was part of that. Again, that's an assumption. And they said they were deployed to Estonia in recent months as part of a broader effort to protect U.S. elections against foreign hacking. American and Estonian officials announced on Thursday this mission allowed personnel from Cyber Command and Estonia's Defense Forces Cyber Command to collaborate on hunting for malicious hacking efforts on critical networks from adversaries. Very interesting. I think this backs up my claim that that's one reason why we can say CISA as an organization, when former head of CISA Christopher Krebs says this was the integrity of the election was preserved, especially from nation state hacking. That's the evidence I have.
I see those comments from that Estonia operation, and I see, that was practice. That was that was the war game, as it were. That was putting it in the field, and it was an opportunity for them to tune tools of detection. Yeah.
Like, we weren't just sitting there looking at logs on our own systems, right? We were literally monitoring the attackers.
So I was going to say, I think what's really unfortunate is that Chris has somewhat been vilified, but when he came out and said these things, I kind of wish that he had actually mentioned all the agencies that and the efforts that went into the statement that he was putting out.
Right. But that's classified, Joff, right? I mean, there's...
I know there's only so much he can say, but, we in the community, we took that at face value, and we knew that he was coming from a position of strength.
Yes.
And
yes.
He has our back, and he still has my back. I can't
Agreed.
believe that he's been treated this way, but it's time for people to actually trust that when multiple agencies are doing in-depth, great work like this, that it actually means something.
Yeah. Tyler has that look on his face, like he wants to say something. He doesn't know how much he can say or what he can say, but he wants to say something. Love you, Tyler.
I mean, we really do have to start understanding that it's a different day and age. Like, federal government and the full force and weight of some of the agencies and efforts put behind particular engagements, missions, objectives, things such as elections, where there's unbiased and unpartisan opinions and efforts being applied. Those have to be taken and really understand the amount of work it takes to do that from a political standpoint, a technology standpoint, and then understand how much effort and weight that should hold from our standpoint. From the commercial place, in order to get this done in government, it takes a big lift. And when you do make that lift, there's a huge resource behind that. When we try and do this with inside of a commercial organization, we have the full weight and buy-in of usually a board or a committee or asset owners. You're trying to do this with inside of an organization that doesn't have all that. And so when you apply that to a government and this actually happens, it is a pretty big feat, and one that actually should be well recognized and understood for what it is. It's very well done and has a lot of backing and a lot of research behind it, because we have to be able to trust the election system.
Yeah.
If we don't trust that, that's a problem.
But I think that the realization that it was better than the integrity of 2016 is a gross understatement, right? I mean,
gross.
But one of the other things that CISA did in that light is we indicted the hackers from the 2016 election hacking. And not just like throwing it out there. Like, no, we were like, it's Russia. It was GRU. by the way, it was this subsection of GRU with this number, this unit within GRU, and these people within GRU, and likely we will never, bring them to justice here in the U.S. I mean, that was totally
that wasn't the point.
That wasn't the point. That was totally a statement, basically, to the world to say, like, don't hack our shit.
We know who you are.
Yeah,
we've got 4 years to figure this out. We know what you're going to do next, and by the way, we've already planned for this, so deal with it. Here's our next move.
Right. But now on the flip side of that, I feel bad for those that the opposite has happened, and I think Darknet Diaries did a great interview and podcast with Jake Williams, right? And that's almost like the opposite, right? In that, I think there's a lot left up to speculation there. But you could listen to that and come to the conclusion that it also works in the other way around, that there are enemy nation states did get into some of our systems. And, of course, there was the huge data leak and Eternal Blue and all that in the tool sets that were leaked from those teams. And it works the other way, too. But I also think that we've learned, the U.S. government and the U.S. has learned from maybe some of those past mistakes and largely cleaned stuff up.
So here's the big problem with the elections and where we're at as a country. We have a nation state that has dealt with this. We've dealt with this technologically. We've addressed this from a stance of security and securing the election systems. We've done a good job around that. However, we have a general populace that does not have a trusted source of information. We have a general populace that has misinformation coming through multiple sources of social media, and we have a general populace that is probably not educated enough to really delineate the information sources, or even our news sources do not have the ability to delineate the information that they're provided and or giving out. And so the campaign this year is much different than 2016. Well, 2016 was a target attack against technology. This year, attack against the human element. Right. And we're dealing with the intellect and ability of humans to make informed decisions based on the information provided to them.
Well, this came up in the 60 Minutes interview. I forget who interviewed Christopher Krebs, but he was like, well, there's reports that, votes were taken from the U.S. and tabulated in servers in Germany. Chris was like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
like, how did that even? And again, I think that's likely fake news, in my opinion. I have no
disinformation.
It's a disinformation campaign. I have no evidence to back that up, but in everything that I've seen, I would come to the conclusion that is complete fake news.
Well, it's like the one about the Dominion systems. They were talking about, there's this whole thing about the Dominion system was developed in Venezuela by Hugo Chavez and all this stuff, and I'm like, what? And the Dominion guy's sitting there saying, no, that's not true at all. It's completely made up. It's completely false. And yet I still see people constantly posting saying, oh, you just refuse to see, you refuse to believe. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, show me some proof. Show me some evidence. Just show me the evidence and I'll read it. But it's like, you don't have it. You just keep saying it, but that doesn't make it true.
But I think that's what us hackers bring to the table is that we're like, show me the evidence. Because we've done investigations like, oh, my server's hacked. And it's like, well, okay, I need to go find the evidence, right? Yeah. We're very scientifically driven.
But people convince themselves of stuff. Because one thing, from doing all these forensics cases, one of the things that I saw as a psychological aspect of forensics was people that were doing divorces always got to this point where they would say, I think my house is bugged. Mm-hmm. And they would want you to come do a walk down to see if their house was bugged. And we had bug detectors, and we had, we go walk down the house, we go look in the vents and look in all these places. And, I'm not like a CIA operative or something, but it's like I can use my eyes and I can use my RF detectors and all this stuff, and I can go, guys, if there's bugs here, they must have been planted by I never said that because, God, that really set them off. But, the idea that these bugs must have been planted by Tyler or somebody because,
the same people that put the bugs in the typewriters from the KGB were the same ones that bugged your house as part of your divorce.
But,
right?
No matter how much you showed people that there's no bug here, and the reason that your husband guessed that you were going to be at the country club on Saturday was because you go to the country club every Saturday. Yeah. Not because there's some secret agency that somebody paid millions of dollars to, like a TV script, to bug your house and watch everything you do with satellites. I'm like, no, there's no evidence here. And it didn't matter. They're still like, I know there's something here. I'm going to a hotel. I know my house is bugged. And it's like, yeah, okay, well.
Without getting amazingly political, even though we're skirting around this, I mean, factually, what's really happened to us here in the last 4 years is when you have disinformation that is promoted actively by a political authority for the purposes of political gain, that's when you have a society that moves into a very dangerous area, because the political authority that's promoting that for gain is manipulating certain people, even though on the other hand he may be doing the right things. Look at CISA, for example, right? CISA was an excellent move and has succeeded.
Yep.
Right, and unfortunately, Krebs is no longer there for political reasons.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully it continues under another competent leader is equal to Christopher Krebs. Agreed. Job, and that happens on both sides, right?
Yeah,
but that's an interesting point. How do you use fake news to your advantage, no matter what political side you're on?
What's the chance he just gets rehired in a month and a half or 2 months?
What? I hope he does. Actually. Yeah. He's got my support.
I mean, they did say his political affiliation was Republican in the 60 Minutes report, but who knows what could happen?
Yeah. They were very unbiased around that, and that comes down to the problem that you've run into. We don't have Walter Cronkite anymore. That is the definitive source of his reputation's on the line, right?
Right.
We have multiple sources of news that are going to provide whatever they can find, and all of these things corroborate to each other, which is also a problem because they all have an agenda and have backing. We are at a stage where, from a consumer standpoint, we do not have a good way to do this. Those that are educated are the 1% of 1%. We have the technology chops to do that. However, even with those technology chops, that is an exercise that takes an extraordinary amount of effort and time in order to figure out the real backing behind this. You look at something like Bellinger and Bellinger Cat and the research that they do around single stories, and it takes them months to bring to light the actual truth around things that are happening in mainstream media.
It comes back to the famous Sneakers quote. It's all about the information, what we see, what we hear. It's all about the information. It really is. But now we can go back in history even before Sneakers, and whether or not we want to believe in what we see and what we hear that happened in 1983. Jeff, were you familiar with the Able Archer exercise in 1983?
Not ringing a bell. I wasn't born yet.
So now we know that's a lie, because you talked about your career and experiences on the show in a 2-part series. But it was basically, I think it was what WarGames was based on. It was a
NATO exercise.
It was a NATO exercise that basically the U.S. was doing a nuclear exercise, it was an
escalation exercise,
a tabletop exercise. But the Soviet Union at the time was paying attention to what the U.S. was doing and nearly triggered World War III because they thought that we were actually launching missiles when we weren't. And that's the crux of the story as it leads to WarGames. And it really was an article titled how one 1983 exercise nearly triggered World War III.
Yep. Well, I was going to comment. I know you're trying to segue, and it's all tied together. But I forget what year was Rodney King. Was that like 89, 90, 91, somewhere in that range?
I thought it was
before you were born, Jeff.
No, I thought it was 90s.
A little bit later, I think.
March 3rd, 1991.
It was 91.
91.
Well, the issue back then was largely that there was, which was a kind of a new thing, there was somebody that videotaped and had a video of what actually happened, which was, Rodney King getting beaten up by a bunch of police. I forget how many there were. And the police later on were acquitted, or the case was thrown out. And the shock and horror back then was, how, we have the video evidence. How could this be? And what was at issue back then was like, wow, we don't even trust the video evidence because a lot of the claims of the attorneys for the police as defendants were, well, you don't know what happened before, you don't know what happened, it's just a point in time, it's not the complete picture. Now, fast forward 30, almost 30 years, and we've gone from not believing what's there in terms of video evidence to, well, we have video evidence, but we can't trust it because it might have been manipulated. It could be fake. I find it fascinating that we sort of skipped over. We can trust what we see to what do we trust, and I wanted to, if I may, segue, but again, it's still related. I had posted an article that a college buddy of mine sent to me about a week ago, actually less than a week, not that it matters, but he was asking, is this real? Is this guy that this article is about a big person in cybersecurity? And I looked at the articles like, well, I've never heard of him, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So I did what I usually do when I encounter somebody's name. I go to LinkedIn and look for a LinkedIn profile. Didn't find it, which I thought was kind of odd. So I Googled him, and he did show up as having been a speaker at a cybersecurity summit. And I looked at his profile there, and it mentions what company he works for. So I go look up the company in LinkedIn, and that page that existed was auto-generated, needed a lot of information filled in. It's basically a placeholder. So I'm Googling that company again, and it doesn't, looking for a website. From what I can tell, it doesn't exist. Now, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to fake news all the time, I hope. Not that I'm aware of. But I'm like, this looks like it's a fake news article, and it's in a very elaborate fake news article, which I wanted to share and hopefully have a short discussion, because it sort of continuing on what we're talking about of, we as security professionals, we can OSINT and do some diving. For those that are wanting to fact check and not simply rely on, well, somebody else did the research. What are some simple things you can do to try to satisfy your own mind that something is fake news or not? I'm reasonably satisfied that this is fake news because I didn't really find any evidence of this guy beyond basically the context that this article was written in. The references that they have, yes, I could find that, but I couldn't find anything else. So I don't know if the guy is real or not.
Right. And it depends, Jeff, largely on how much they've gone through in steps to take to be able to look as legitimate as possible. And, I'll call it, we covered an article about WireGuard AG where there was this mysterious $2 billion that was missing. And it turns out that story was much deeper than even I think we covered. And Citizen Lab actually did an investigation. This was actually another Darknet Diary, the most recent Darknet Diaries podcast went into this. And I'm like, I remember covering this story. And it traced back to an Indian company called Bell. I want to say it's Belfort, but that's not. That's the Wolf of Wall Street guy. It traced back to an Indian company called Beltrox. And I remember him, to your point, Jeff, talking about how Beltrox employees had LinkedIn profiles, and some were more kind of legitimate than others. And there was other people on LinkedIn that were vouching for him. You can do a promotion or whatever it's called in LinkedIn, a recommendation for people. And LinkedIn had recommendations. Turns out those were from the private investigators that were hiring Beltrox to do this nefarious hacking into people's email accounts to get information. Those private investigators turned out worked for companies like Exxon that were contracted out to these private investigators to get information about people that were calling out Exxon for unfair practices and unethical practices in some capacity. And it wasn't just Exxon, it was also WireGuard as well. And he started the story of someone that was basically doing short selling, looking at WireGuard as a potential short sell company. And that person was being followed by these, other private investigators and shady people, literally following him around, where he had to secure his family and his home. And one of the the Citizen Lab did this investigation, but it took months. And so if you run into a situation like that, you can expel a lot of resources in trying to uncover the story and get yourself in trouble too. If you started down a rabbit hole like happened with Dark Basin, there could be powerful people that in that chain that might come after you, and it might be a bad day. Fortunately, the person who was doing the short selling never came under physical harm. But that all the way on the other end of the spectrum could be some very quick and easy, simple checks of just validating, asking around, and running through some other things. Doug, I know you've done some of this research as probably part of your investigations and expert witness work as well.
I mean, we always just use, like, for people, we always use a sort of journalistic approach, which was, kind of what Jeff did, but it's like, can I find two sources?
Yep.
And we did. I mean, I remember back in like quite a while ago, we saw a lot of this stuff, and it wasn't always like fake people, but we would see people that had fake resumes, fake credentials, and we started investigating these people. And usually, if it's a nation state, if it's some kind of elaborate thing, I don't think that an average person is going to find it. But for us, we found that just a very perfunctory review of trying to find two sources to validate something, we just started popping people all the time who had fake degrees. I remember I got this person who, in fact, I got this one because the person had a degree hanging on their wall, and it says Harvard University on it. And the guy had a Harvard mug, and we were interviewing this guy. We were just reviewing people's credentials, the company. It was nothing illegal. There was nothing reviewing credentials, and and this guy's name popped up because he had some strange things like date problems and stuff on his resume. I'm in the guy's office talking to him. He's a high-level employee. I was talking to him. I was noticing his name. Oh, you went to Harvard? Oh, yeah. And he's got a Harvard mug and all. And I was thinking something strange about that. And I couldn't think of what it was, and we left. And that night I was going, I think I know what that is. And I called a person I knew who went to Harvard, and I said, would you read me your degree? And he starts reading it to me, and it's in Latin. And I called Harvard the next morning, and I said, do you print degrees that are not in Latin? And they said, no, they're all in Latin. And I was like, I asked the guy the next day, I was like, why is your degree printed in English? And he's like, what? And I was like, your degree's in English. It says Harvard, but all Harvard degrees are printed in Latin. And the guy was like, oh, and then he did the whole criminal thing. They had this option, and we found out this guy never attended Harvard. It was all just made up. And so usually when you start just sort of poking at that, which is sort of a police technique, you'll start to find big gaping holes in a lot of stuff. And that's kind of how I've always treated like fake news, is just by, does this seem to have support? Where did it come from? And if you just look a little bit, you'll start seeing its circular references that are, this tweet was referenced by this news agency, which then somebody else referenced that news agency, and it just loops all the way back around to some just ridiculous thing. Right. Or it's a person, I don't know this, I've never heard of this person they're saying is, one of the premier people in our field, that he's a professor who is, world acclaimed for his research. I'm like, it's not a normal, it's not a name that I would forget if I saw it. And I don't know who this person is, and that doesn't mean anything.
But also, just sometimes to your point, I like to go to court records as well, or indictments, because oftentimes they'll list the person's real name and known aliases, and that can really kind of spiral you.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler's laughing because I know you've done some of these. Tyler and I kind of collaborate. I'm like, where do I go to find? I want to find this information. Like, can I get that legally without a private investigator's license, or like what's public record that I can reference to uncover court documents or people's aliases, right?
Yeah, again, we go back to the general public's ability to delineate the misinformation from real information, and what's published on the internet and what you can dig up becomes an exercise in your analytical capabilities, not necessarily what's published. Yeah, there's a bunch of articles that corroborate and connect to each other, which is what we figured out. A good article that we released from NISOS way back in the day by Cindy Otis was around a former Fox executive that was doing disinformation or misinformation for the last election through a Macedonian media company. Now, all of this was tied and took a lot of investigating and took a lot of technical effort in order to tie these particular technical pieces together, in order to use the analytical mind and make the delineation and jump from technical data points all the way to, hey, this is misinformation and this is blatantly wrong. Now, the general public has no ability to do that. So how do we expect or how do we as a country come to a point in which we can rely on something past what is being pushed down through social media? I mean, we have a whole generation outside of us that is of voting age that relies on 15-second videos of stupid people kicking themselves in the nuts or putting shaving cream on their face, or I don't even know what the latest challenge is.
If that's not a scene right out of Idiocracy, I don't know what is.
And don't forget Dunning-Kruger. Don't forget the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less information you have about a subject, the more likely you are to believe something that reinforces what you do believe.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so we're relying on an entire generation that is of voting age that has this information at their fingertips, that has an attention span of 15 seconds and is watching stupid shit that has nothing to do with valid information that is not even available to them. Yeah, we're in a state of utter chaos from a misinformation and disinformation point. So we really have to figure out as an industry and the people that have the know-how and technical chops to do this, how do we make this better? How do we actually go about making some change and providing some insight into this? Because I honestly do not know how to get my grandma to not forward on the stupid,
I know,
Trump latest campaign of he's going to win and this is all a sham. Like, I don't know how to do that. So we really have to start brainstorming. And I think we need these think tanks that are also being targeted, which is another news story.
Mm-hmm.
We need these think tanks and this outside of the box thinking, our hacker mindset, to address this from a societal issue and from a higher order of thinking issue in order to really make effect. We have an entire country that is at a point in which CISA directors and DHS directors are being fired over stuff that is not relevant, and places that there is effect being made and changes are being done, and he's being fired. So we need to make and come to arms and really do something about this, because I think this is actually an important time frame for our 1% of people that do have the know-how to do this, that do know how to recognize misinformation and disinformation. So we really have to kind of understand what the problem is, frame the problem, and then figure out how we can hack this problem, because it is a problem.
It's not just us, though.
Hold on. Wait, Larry, then Joff.
Yeah,
Okay,
Joff, mine's really quick. Tyler, I got a quick solution to your grandma problem. I had this issue with an in-law, and I literally called her up and said, stop forwarding me this stuff, because if you do, you don't know how to use BCC. I will humiliate you every time in front of all of your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, oh, okay. And she started forwarding them again and doesn't know how to use BCC. So I humiliated her in front of all of her friends.
My grandmother would have hit you with a stick.
No, he didn't say grandma. Larry said in-law.
Oh, in-law.
Yeah, Tyler said grandma.
Yeah. I don't
In-laws
get
a
the
fair
chocolate.
game.
My grandmother just used the analog method.
Hold on, Joff.
Joff.
So I do have a comment, and I remember saying this to family and others. Actually, at the time, there was a certain individual in Florida, in a religious community, that burned a Quran, right? And my comment at the time was, the First Amendment comes with, like any privilege, comes with responsibility. And what's happening to us is we've abdicated the responsibility. And the same thing goes for any of these news outlets, right? If you abdicate the responsibility, if you go purely for the profit, and you develop communities of closed, small bubbles that become believers and actually disbelievers in fact, and unsubscribe from fact, then you end up with a country that has this problem, which we're all experiencing. So I think one of the only ways that we can actually get away from it is for those that have the megaphone, which are the very, very large media entities. We are going to have to legislate truth at some level, because if you don't take the profit motive out of it, if you don't actually disrupt the fact that they can continue to create these bubble communities of disinformation for profit, you're never actually going to be able to break it.
Well, let's continue on that legislative theme. Let's go to my story number 12. Baltimore County Schools close after a ransomware attack. And that's exactly one of my questions, though. Like, why is Baltimore, anyway, the subject of these ransomware attacks? I think more interestingly is I'm not sure if this is an actual bill that's trying to be passed through Congress and being made into law or not, or if it's just in the kind of suggestion stage that we should create a bill. But there are proposals out there that I've heard of, again, I don't know the state of them, that are posing the question, should it be illegal to pay a ransom for ransomware? Because that's essentially funding bad actors, but also potentially funding other nation states such as North Korea, such as Iran, who knows?
So Paul, just real quick to set the stage for this one. The article that you referenced was published on December 1st. And I said, again?
Yeah.
But it appears that they are basing the article from a tweet from the Baltimore County Public Schools that was posted on November 25th. So that, there was some time in between, and I could have sworn, one of the last times I was on the show, 2-3 weeks ago, that it was I had the same thing. It was Baltimore City schools closed because of ransomware attack. What?
Oh, well, Baltimore as a city was hit with a ransomware attack, not the school department, but that was last year.
Oh, no, the schools were.
Yeah, but last year, I think it was last year, the city of Baltimore was hit with a ransomware attack.
Just a couple weeks ago, Baltimore public schools were hit with the ransomware attacks, and they had the day off from school for an extra long weekend because they couldn't do any of their virtual schooling.
Well, it sounds like from the article that auditors kind of pointed out there was some gross security violations or negligence in play. So who knows? Sorry, Tyler.
Here's the big thing with ransomware and the ability for us to respond to and deal with ransomware. We have insurance agencies and this new cyber insurance, which runs most of the response capabilities via your ability and IR company being on the list to show up and deal with these. Now, these cyber insurance policies and your ability to deal with ransomware directly applies to your insurance policy. So you run into a situation where this policy is now controlled and largely paid out by insurance. We run into things where you don't get good advice, you deal with companies that are grossly overpaid, and you are paying a premium for a company and a service that is now covering your ass for negligence and or misconfigurations, or they're trying to find those things so that they do not have to pay out on these policies. Big problem.
The law you're talking about is from I did this story a couple of weeks ago. It's the Office of Foreign Assets, and there's a rule that you cannot pay money to certain people that are on certain lists. So this would be like Al Qaeda or somebody.
You say rule like it's not necessarily.
Well, no, it is a law. I mean, it's a law, and so it's from the Department of the Treasury. And so if you're a company and you want to pay a ransom, say for a kidnapping to Al Qaeda, you have to go to this Office of Foreign Assets and get a waiver, because otherwise paying a ransom to a terrorist group, a hostile nation state, etc., is considered supporting that cause, and it is illegal. So what has typically happened is big insurance companies and people like that have often had a relationship with this Treasury Department Office of Foreign Assets, and they send their attorneys over there, and all the attorneys sit down and they get your waiver and they bring it back, and then you pay the ransom and get your employee back or whatever. And so they were saying, the article that you're probably referencing was about ransomware could fall under this model, and if it was shown that North Korea, for instance, was the one that was ransomwaring you and you paid them money, then you could be essentially charged.
Which today is really hard to prove.
It's very hard to prove. And so they also said that, if you're an individual company, this might be a challenge to get this waiver, but if you're, a big insurance company, you probably do this all the time, and you have all kinds of waivers and lawyers and people in DC, and they go over.
Here's the other part with that, and the problem that we really run into with cyber insurance is Well, they are trying to, deal with cyber insurance pieces of this. The many incidents I've dealt with where there is ransom being held, the cyber insurance companies find a way around to skirt the law and or whatever is being disseminated to the public, and they will have a broker handle the agreement and or Bitcoin acquisition in order to pay the ransom for particular data that is not the entity paying the data. So they're no longer paying, the terrorists, or they're not contributing or negotiating with terrorists. But the cyber insurance is negotiating with terrorists and buying the Bitcoin at a premium, obviously, and getting the data back and buying that out. So that becomes, again, another conflict of interest and a way in which these companies are really trying to deal with this, because they want their customer happy, for one. B, they want to look like the hero. And C, they just want to make sure that this is dealt with in the most minimal way from a media standpoint as possible. So they have no general interest in making sure that this is done right or not negotiating with terrorists or organizations. They pay the ransom. Don't get me wrong. All these places that they get their data back magically, or they have someone negotiate or deal with this, it's not some magic. It is usually them paying through a brokerage, which is another fund that they own or a company they own, and they negotiate and buy this Bitcoin and negotiate and pay the ransom. So, all of this is just smoke and mirrors from a cyber insurance standpoint.
Well, I think the other term for that is money laundering, but
I mean, exactly.
Did we mention that it was a couple months ago the FBI changed their guidance to say there are some cases where you should pay the ransom?
Yeah.
Well,
that it's not all black and white.
Like, we've ran into cases where you're dealing with, say, something like a prosecuting attorney's office or a county or state local government, where we have cases that literally will be thrown out of court because the data is tainted or not attainable, right? We're talking about people that are child molesters or have ongoing cases that are going to get dismissed because there's no data there. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to pay a small amount of fee in order to continue the operation of justice and the judicial system. So we have to pay that. So you can't draw this black and white line, but you also have to make sure that you're doing that above board and not trying to smoke and mirror this through a cyber insurance or slush fund that is therefore funded and or sold at a premium to customers that is the taxpayer at the end of the day.
Well, no, that's what makes it hard. That's why it's not black and white. It's because there's opportunity for abuse. It can't just be a snap decision. There's got to be a lot of forethought put into this.
But no one's putting forethought into
that
because there's not advisory councils, right? There's no one doing the smart analysis. We don't have the cyber professionals. They're advising these cyber companies. They're coming in and saying, you have to use our people because we're the cyber company, we're the cyber insurance. Here's the people that are smart. They're really not, and they really don't know what they're doing. They're covering up half of this, and they're not even doing their job. And you have these companies that are really good at what they do not being utilized because they're not on some list by a cyber insurance company because they cost too much. So we really do have a problem in this industry to try and get these people on board, get some education done, and make sure this is done right. Because, again, this is going to continue to happen and may continue to happen because the ransomware is going to be infiltrated and it's not going to be dealt with properly because there's no IR happening in a proper manner.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that was quite the rant.
Could we preserve hacker rights if someone were to ransomware data in the Van Buren versus the United States case? And Jeff, I know you covered this on your show in at least one, maybe more than one episode. It seems to be heating up right now for some reason, right? And this is where we covered this actually on Paul Security Weekly as well as Security and Compliance Weekly, where Van Buren was charged with something else, which was dismissed, and a statute in the CFAA, and the CFAA one is sticking and could impact our ability to do our jobs in some capacity, or what you do in your job and how you do that in your job. Jeff, you talked to attorneys about this on your show.
Yeah, we did. It was a couple months ago, and we were talking about it when it was in the press that the case was going before the Supreme Court, and we didn't really go into a lot of detail because the lawyer was like, well, we have to kind of wait and see. This is going to be really interesting. We should watch it. So, and we haven't really discussed it since. So basically, long-winded sayings, I don't know. I haven't seen anything.
So this article says the Supreme Court will determine what unauthorized means, and it's anybody's guess. The court could define unauthorized access anywhere from violating a site's terms of service to logging into a system that a person has no user account for. What's interesting is Van Buren did have an account, but I want to say he was committing fraud.
Then it probably turns into violating terms of service. So,
yeah, when I look at this case, I'm like, this is not, to me, not an attorney, obviously, not so much about unauthorized access to computer services as it is abusing whatever access you have to, I don't know if it's so much committing fraud, but using your access to a computer system for illegal purposes.
It's beyond the scope of what you're supposed
like a
to be
proxy
using.
for someone who shouldn't have access to the information, which to me is different from unauthorized access, which is what I read the CFAA and interpret it as, which, again, I'm not an attorney. I'm certainly not on the Supreme Court. So,
Well, so it's coming back to me a little bit now, and it's I think it's a little bit unauthorized access, but more unauthorized use.
Yes.
You have the ability. I mean, hopefully the statute of limitations is passed. But one of my first jobs while I was in college was doing loan skip tracing. It's looking back, it's where I learned some social engineering skills because we were allowed to lie to people that we were calling, and all of the records were kept at that point on a mainframe, and we were all sitting at terminals that could access the mainframe. And me being me, I'm like, I wonder whose records I could look up and see who has defaulted student loans. Oh, look, all of my college professors that are listed here, and I could get to my brother's records. He wasn't defaulted, but they had records, and he's like, could you delete it and pay it off? I'm like, yeah, actually I could. I'm not going to, but I was clearly going, and this is very true of the early days of internet hacking, is I could clearly go places because I could get there. I wasn't breaking in, I wasn't dropping an ODA, I wasn't exploiting anything. It was just file permissions. But should I have been there? No. Would I have probably gotten in trouble and fired if people found out I was doing something?
What's interesting in your example, Jeff, is that they said the broad reading of the CFAA could criminalize anything from lying on a data profile to sharing a password to a streaming service. Had you shared your password maybe with your brother and your brother had changed the record, again, completely hypothetical, that's absolutely not what happened. Just as an example, that could trigger the CFAA to be used as what prosecutes, in my fictitious example of your brother and your access to the computer system, right?
Right.
In this case, a streaming service, right? Which we all know happens all the time. People share passwords for streaming services all the time. And as much as myself, I discourage that behavior. I'm like, you should probably just really pay for that, because that's, in my mind, more theft than it is a violation of CFAA.
Well, if it's theft, they don't need the CFAA. They can charge you under all kinds of other statutes, just like they charge Mitnick or whatever. So I think the CFAA is just going to always be that sort of pure, thing that if you committed fraud, they can charge you with that if you did all these other things. So probably, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they determine.
It certainly will.
Hey, Paul, I got
yes,
one.
Please. I was
going
to say who else has some stories. Yeah.
I got one to cover, just because it is a hugely amazing read. My story number 2 from the Google Project Zero folks, specifically Ian Beer. It's the iOS zero-click radio proximity exploit Odyssey. Aside
that
from
is a hell of a read.
Aside from the whole amazingness that is this article and journey, the things that he says right up front, like, hey, 2020 lockdown, I spent 6 months developing an exploit for iOS devices, and it was hugely successful and wildly amazing, and figured out all of these crazy tricks to actually do what I needed to do. Effectively, in order to trigger this exploit, you needed certain features to be enabled on the phone, which are on by default, but they aren't always broadcasting or listening. But he found a way to make them enable by sending other wireless packets, and so he could effectively do this whenever he wanted, even in states when AWDL wasn't actually up and listening and or beaconing.
And he has a picture of 13 different Wi-Fi adapters.
Yeah.
This is the most elaborate write-up I've seen on it.
It is 30,000 words.
Oh my!
And it will take you a good hour to read it.
I flagged it for later
if you want to dissect it.
Yeah, I flagged it for later for reading. Yeah, and Larry, just to clarify for our listeners, your story number 2 in the show notes, an iOS 0-day click radio proximity exploit Odyssey. Really is an Odyssey.
Right.
Yeah. And the biggest takeaway from the article was right from Ian's article is the takeaway from this project should not be no one will spend 6 months of their life just to hack my phone. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Someone will. Yeah.
This is just some dude in his apartment for 6 months he's bored and does all this stuff. And it is an amazing journey. And 13 wireless adapters, because he found that the packets that he needed to be able to send in effectively raw mode with Scapy could only be sent by certain wireless adapters, and some could only be acknowledged by others. And it was crazy.
I mean, there's snippets of source code in here, diagrams, charts, like the whole is crazy. Amazing piece of. I mean, it really speaks to me that much of the hacker spirit is built around persistence, right? And if you look back to the original terms that we covered last year in our hacking roundtable, we're going to do that again this year on December 10th on this Paul Security Weekly show.
Next week.
And persistence is a huge thing. It has its roots in hacking, and certainly this article, Larry, embodies that spirit, as well as a lot of great technical research.
Some people wear COVID better than others.
I think I hear Lee trying to chime in there.
So I was going to say, I skipped down to the end for his conclusions and recommendations because I want to see. I thought it was very interesting that he talked about legacy code back to 1985 still being part of iOS, and I'm sure that's not the only platform that has bits of code from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And it's and code strategy was also, he talks about, pretty much need a strategy to make sure you haven't got vulnerable stuff underneath the layers of stuff you built recently. Also moving beyond fuzzing to find vulnerabilities. He's very thoughtful on this. I mean, and this what he's talking about, I think, is not specific to iOS. I think he's identifying the issues with iOS, but take any platform where there's a drive to market, which we've talked about before, that market drive will trump security, and you could make these same observations. It's actually a really thoughtful article, and I want to take time to digest the whole bloody thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, Larry, if you go to my story number 1, home Wi-Fi security tips, 5 things to check. And when I saw this headline, I was like, all of us can, hosts and listeners collectively can probably come up with 2, maybe 3, right? 5 might be a stretch for if you really want to protect your home Wi-Fi network. I think you're going to enable some type of encryption, not WEP, but some kind of more modern encryption than WEP on your Wi-Fi network. You're going to choose I put air quotes good password. Those are probably the 2 steps that protect you from most of the attacks. It's interesting, this week and in so many segments in the past month or 2, we've talked about vulnerability management and prioritization. And I think it comes down to focusing on the things that wipe out the majority of attack vectors. And when I think of that for your home Wi-Fi network, as we do in every article that we cover, COVID-19, everyone's working from home. Everyone's going to continue working from home from now to the end of time, which I think is largely a falsy.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think a lot of us will, and a lot of us are going to go back to the office at some point. But you think of those couple things. It's enabling good. I mean, if you're WPA, Larry, I want to pose this question to you because you teach this class for SANS, and you're closer to it than probably most of us today. Enabling some type of encryption, as long as it's not web, probably a good step. You're going to recommend to your home network, right? As long as it's not web, like you're probably good in choosing an encryption that is some derivative of WPA, right? Different levels, of course.
Yep. So if you are doing WPA, at this point, if you're doing WPA, it should be WPA2.
Yep.
WPA2 was ratified in 2004. It's 16 years old.
Yep.
If your router does not support it, just like this article says, you need to go out and spend $30.
and go get a new Wi-Fi router that's WPA2. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. WPA2 with AES CCMP.
Right. And a good password is, look,
20 characters or more.
But that's hard because so many
security is hard.
But so many IoT devices, Jeff, right, require that you enter this password. And so that's what, like, my air quotes good. I would love to have a 20-character completely random string as my password for all of my devices.
At 20 characters, it doesn't need to be random.
Yeah, sure.
No, it doesn't.
So a 20-character password, however, one of my devices may not support a 20-character password. Hopefully they do. All right, let's say they do. They all support a 20-character password. If I go to my Nest thermostat, huge pain in the ass to enter, right, on that friggin' stupid dial thing, you can go to all your other IoT devices and look to your user interfaces for entering that password. Huge pain in the butt. Now, however,
do it on your Apple TV with a remote with one button.
Right? But you only have to do that. But you should only have to do that once unless you change your password or change your SSID or whatever the case may be. So, make your decision wisely and have to do that once. I think that's why people do choose shorter passwords as they add new IoT devices. They don't want to use the dial or the one, to Larry, to your point, that one button on your stupid Apple TV or whatever device you have to enter that 20-character password. But if you do that, you've got a 20-character password, you've got WPA2. Wi-Fi security, and I think we've come a long way since I remember, Larry, and you and I going early days in ShmooCon, seeing the pictures recently, right? It was a different scenario 15 or so years ago than we have today.
And the sad part is there's so many of those things that still work.
Yeah.
And in many of the cases, and it's been really interesting teaching the and being the author of the SANS Wireless class now, and in over this year, is that so many of these attacks were like, we need to start, really considering what it means to crack WPA2 pre-shared key, because, so many of the enterprises have actually started listening to the advice of 16, 20 character passwords. And now we all started working from home using our home Wi-Fi with our enterprise devices on systems that are using 8-character passwords. It's all back to hacking Wi-Fi like 2004 all over again.
Yep.
So
now the other advice is to keep your Wi-Fi device up to date with firmware. My kind of thing is no one's going to do that. We may do that. No one else is going to do that.
Maybe not.
I really think that firmware should just be updated automatically for these commodity Wi-Fi devices. No?
Some of them have that capability.
They do. Ring has that capability. Ring's pushed out security fixes.
But that's not your access point. Your access point is the one that takes everything down.
Yep. Jeff?
And Jeff had a comment.
Well, I wanted to push back a little bit, Larry, on what you said about at 20 characters, it doesn't matter about randomness. My pushback to that is when you start talking 20 characters, you're more likely going to get a passphrase. And I've had discussions with his name escapes me, Schwartau's math guy that helped him write the book Analog Security, his latest book. We chatted online, a month or two ago, because he was talking about the insecurity of passphrases, and he made me think back to my crypto days, when if you think of 20 characters strictly as every character position could be the 50, 60 characters on your keyboard, That's great. It doesn't have to be random. But if you start thinking about people using words and phrases like maybe limericks or stringing their kids' names together or pet names, I mean, there's all sorts of, I mean, it goes back to password guessing, the early days of internet security. I can't tell you how many times I was able to guess people's passwords in just a couple tries. Yeah, so you can. I use song lyrics for my long passwords, but I defy anybody to pick the song that I was choosing. But if you start doing words, his point. Hold on, Larry. His point was like there's only something like 50,000 commonly used words in the English language. Whatever the number was, and you can get a certain amount of success rates. It's going back to the early days of password cracking. All the sets of users. Go ahead, Larry.
And absolutely, Jeff, you're absolutely right. The specific problem that we have with Wi-Fi is for pre-shared key networks. For each one of those password guesses that you're going to perform requires 4,096 iterations of HMAC SHA-1, which even with modern GPU password cracking is still exhaustive.
Wait, even with the new RTX cards that you can't buy yet, that I've been trying to buy for the past month and I can't? Like even 3090s, I want 3. Can I get 3 3090s in a case, Doug? And Doug, thank you. Doug's been reviewing some of my designs for a system that I want to build in 2021 because I can't build it in 2020 because I can't get the latest Ryzen 9 processor 5900X in 16 cores. Like I literally can't buy it yet.
No.
And I can't buy, let alone 2, even one RTX 3090, which is what I want to put in the system. What's amazing is that build still comes in at like $3,500. Yeah. 3,500 to $4,000 is the range that I'm building in. But what you're saying, Larry, is that even that commodity hardware, you're still not cracking these passwords.
No, it's still months to years with even one of those
3090s
to do it. Yep, and you can spend money at Google and start making this really fast.
Well, sure, yeah.
You're spending tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, at AWS and so forth.
Or I could put one of those 3090s and have awesome graphics. I mean, just throwing it out there.
Just in time for Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes.
Right?
Did I hear Paul offer to use a GPU for graphics?
Right?
What the hell, dude?
Nobody does that. To look awesome and then play games, which largely I don't really play games.
He's going to run Ubuntu server on it. I know that. He's going to do what I do.
Right? They look awesome.
One of my students was like almost crying because I have like 2 980s, which are old, but I mean, they're like these monster video cards. And he was like, what are you running on? I was like, oh, it's Ubuntu server.
Yeah, right. Anyway,
it is almost 10 o'clock though.
We digress. It is almost 10 o'clock. Was there any other stories we wanted to cover? We did have one last. If I had to pick one last story, it would be TrickBot.
Yeah,
running UEFI attacks. Our friends over at Eclipsium, in collaboration with Advanced Intelligence, ADV Intel, collaborated to really coin the term TrickBoot, which essentially, what I kind of gleaned from the story, and I apologize to Eclipsium, who's a sponsor on the show, and also just like really good people and good friends. Like I love the team at Eclipsium so much, and they've done great work. In this, I really think they likely work together to reverse engineer TrickBot to uncover this functionality where TrickBot is looking at the exploit paths to getting into UEFI.
Yep.
TrickBot being the Swiss Army knife, really, of attackers to get onto these systems. And it like literally doesn't surprise me that they would go to this attack vector. Like, oh, I've got a great... And TrickBot's one of the also really resilient botnets out there that Microsoft can work with Department of Justice and in Homeland Defense and go, we want to take this down. And they're like, yeah, go for it. Take it down. And as soon as they take it down, it comes back. And it's like, wow, that's really amazing what they've done with TrickBot.
Yep.
The zombie network.
And
it stays alive. It doesn't
stays
die.
alive.
We knew
it's a great point.
UEFI was going to be an attack vector, and we knew that this was a persistence method for APT. It wasn't much longer until like criminal networks and or commercial malware started to pick this up and utilize it. I mean,
yeah, it's just been like a month since we were talking about this before,
Yeah.
about the UEFI attacks and things like that. And so I saw this today too, and I was like, yeah, here it comes.
Which is also scary because, like, outside of Eclipsium, like, what do you utilize from a commercial standpoint in order to monitor and or be able to get some visibility into that layer of the stack?
It's
like,
a lot of work, Tyler, right?
It's hard.
It's hard because it's dependent on you have to, if you don't have something like an Eclipsium, because I've asked them this question, and like, so what do you do? And I've also done briefings with companies like Lenovo and go like, what do you do? And it's like, you're tied to the vendor specific tools that are only their chipset. So if you got Lenovo, maybe you've got 3 or 4 or a dozen other subsystems, you have to go to their tools to interrogate your systems to see what firmware you have running on the hardware inside of your systems to determine if that is actually running the latest version and can be updated. The Eclipsium gives you that advantage. And outside of that, I really don't know what's available to say, like, this might be tainted. Like, this, basically the firmware you're running on the UEFI in your system doesn't match known good firmware that should be installed on your system. The manufacturers largely, from what I found, like Lenovo or whatever, for example, don't give you that level of capability.
Right.
They tell you like, oh, you're out of date, but they don't tell you like, hey, you're up to date, like you're all good, except you might have a backdoor built into that firmware inside of your system. It could be TrickBot that has tainted the firmware inside of your UEFI.
That's where the Intel processor really shines, and that's where we start to talk about that ARM-based or AMD-based advantage between consumer grade and that server level, like, hey, we need to know this hardware is good. When we start to look at the OS interacting with the hardware level and providing security stack analysis with inside of memory and protections at that level, then yeah, that's where you get and pay for the differentiation that Intel is providing at that very bare bones assembly level hardware stack that is going to become more and more integrated. You know, we were talking about this earlier.
But Joff was talking about that during the break, Joff. Like, when you're relying on the microcode and the integrity of the microcode, like how many? It's like a almost chicken and egg or race condition problem. Like, who's going to get there first to validate it versus an attacker that can get there first before the validation, right? When it's all in the microcode, gets super complicated.
Or change it. Imagine malware that is now going to go to a microcode level and change an individual machine code instruction by manipulating the microcode. I mean,
but that's where it's all. I mean,
you can rig the whole thing.
But and you look at Apple's M1 chip, I'm continually impressed with what they've built. Again, I still stand by my statements that it's going to be a rocky road, right, to get there for compatibility issues. But when you look at the performance of that chip, because everything's built on that chip, right, including the security measures that are built on that one chip. And I also think it's encouraging that Linux does support socks and ARM-based socks, and I think we could have commodity-based socks, but then what does that mean for security? Again, John, back to your point, when attackers can manipulate the microcode on that sock that is now, you're not talking about different subsystems now. We've lost that kind of ubiquitous nature of these systems that are inside of our systems, and we've all on one chip. That's your CPU, that's your GPU, that's your security hardware validation, that's your bus for your USB or Lightning or whatever Apple wants to call it. It's all on one chip. If an attacker can get inside of that chip, yeah, sure, great performance for us as users because it's all on one chip and we're sharing a single bus. We're not worrying about different buses and caches. It's all on one chip. But if I can manipulate that and get below that level, that's dangerous.
Yeah, so it's going to take surgical manipulation, though, because I liken it a lot to, and it is very much analogous to hacking the BGP protocol across the internet. If you break BGP, you break the internet, and it is suboptimal to your actual goals. So there's going to have to be very, very surgical work, and it's very similar for BIOS hacking, right? BIOS hacking, same thing. And once that becomes read-write memory, then it is subject to compromise, but you have to be very careful about how you compromise it. So but it's a weird space we're entering there, because there was a lot of comfort in read-only memory.
Right? Yeah, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, that's all gone.
Well, there's a lot of comfort in firmware and hardware, right? Like we're trusting that as we boot, the hardware and the precursors to the OS are a secure space,
which is all coming from China.
The case,
all from China.
All from China.
All bets are off.
Okay, we're all fucked. All right, goodbye, everybody. Have a great night.
On that gloomy note, Doug, please take us out.
Well, you just can't win here at Security Weekly, and sometimes the computer just freaks out.